The roar of engines shattered the silence of the remote village before anyone even saw the cars. Under the torn canopy, customers turned toward the red earth road. The wooden benches and plastic plates suddenly felt too fragile for what was coming. Beatrice, the silent widow, froze with her hand halfway to her mouth. 3 pristine white SUVs tore through the dust, looking like foreign objects in the humble setting. The convoy screeched to a halt right in front of Amina's food stand. Amina's heart hammered against her ribs. She wiped her palms on her faded blue apron, terrified. Was it the police? Land grabbers? The first door opened. A tall, imposing man in a sharp blue suit stepped out. He looked powerful, flanked by security guards in cream-colored suits who scanned the area intensely. The man didn't look at the crowd. He walked straight toward Amina. She stood protective over Beatrice, unable to speak. The man stopped, removing his sunglasses. His eyes were not angry, but swimming with tears. "Are you Amina?" he asked, his voice trembling. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for keeping my mother alive." The crowd gasped. Beatrice looked up, confused. The billionaire turned to the homeless widow, his composure breaking. Right there in the red dust, he dropped to his knees. "Mother?" he wept. "Is it really you?" The silence that followed Peter's cry was heavier than the heat of the midday sun. He remained on his knees in the red dirt, his expensive suit trousers staining at the knees, his hands reaching out toward the frail woman sitting on the wooden bench. But the reunion didn't go as the crowd expected. There was no joyful embrace, no sudden spark of memory. Beatrice stared at the weeping billionaire with hollow, terrified eyes. She didn't see a son, she saw a stranger, a threat. "I don't know you," she croaked, her voice trembling. She dropped her plastic spoon, the sound of it hitting the plastic plate sharp and final. Panic seized her. She scrambled backward on the bench, knocking over a cup of water. "Get away, leave me alone." Peter froze. "Mama, it's me. It's Peter. Your son." He moved to touch her hand, but Beatrice screamed, a raw, jagged sound that made the security guards flinch and step forward, hands reaching for their holsters. "No!" Amina shouted, stepping explicitly between the billionaire and the widow. The crowd gasped at her audacity. A cleaning lady blocking a man who looked like he owned the whole state. But Amina didn't care about his money. She cared about the terror in Beatrice's eyes. "Don't touch her," Amina said, her voice shaking but firm. She placed a calming hand on Beatrice's shoulder. Immediately, the old woman grabbed the fabric of Amina's faded blue apron, twisting it in her grip like a lifeline. She buried her face in Amina's side, hiding from the man in the blue suit. Peter looked up at Amina, his face a mask of shock and heartbreak. He slowly stood up, the power dynamic shifting. The billionaire was helpless, the cleaning lady held all the power. She doesn't remember me," Peter whispered, looking at his mother clinging to a stranger. "She remembers nothing of before," Amina said softly, stroking Beatrice's grey hair. "She has been here for years. She only knows who feeds her. She only knows who protects her." Peter looked around the dusty shack, the flies buzzing near the coolers, and then back at his mother, who was trembling against Amina's hip. He wiped his face with a silk handkerchief. He realized that his convoy, his money, and his security meant nothing here. He couldn't force her into the car. It would break her. He looked Amina dead in the eye. "I need to take her to a hospital. I need to take her home, but she won't go with me." He paused, a desperate edge entering his voice. "She will only go if you come too. I'm so grateful you're here with me, my beautiful story family. If today's story has already pulled you in, show some love by clicking subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I love knowing where my family is. Tomorrow brings another emotional journey you absolutely cannot miss, so make sure you're subscribed and ready." Amina hesitated, her eyes darting between the terrified widow and her humble livelihood. The pot of stew was still bubbling on the charcoal stove. The cooler of rice was still half full. This wooden stand was the only thing keeping starvation at bay for her. To leave now, in the middle of the lunch rush, felt like madness. I cannot just leave, sir," Amina stammered, wringing her hands. "My business. Who will sell the food? Who will return the coolers?" Peter didn't even glance at the shop. He reached into his suit jacket, pulled out a thick wad of crisp bills, and placed them gently onto the rough wooden table next to a plate of half-eaten rice. "This is more than you will make in a year," he said, his voice desperate. "Please, I am not asking you to abandon your life. I am asking you to help me save hers," Beatrice whimpered, sensing the indecision. She tugged hard on Amina's arm. "Amina, home. We go home," she mumbled, pointing at Amina's small shack behind the stand, not understanding that the man wanted to take them to a palace. Amina looked at the money, then at Beatrice's pleading eyes. She knew she couldn't let the old woman be dragged away screaming by strange men. She sighed, a sound of resignation and resolve. She called out to a neighbor selling roasted corn nearby. "Mama Chinedu, watch my stand. I have to go." The walk to the car felt like crossing a border between two worlds. The security guards parted like the Red Sea, their earpieces buzzing. As they approached the white SUV, the heat of the sun seemed to intensify, making the vehicle look like a mirage. A guard opened the rear door, and a blast of frigid, conditioned air hit Amina's face, smelling of expensive leather and citrus. Getting Beatrice inside was a struggle. The old woman resisted until Amina climbed in first, sliding across the butter-colored leather seats. The material was so soft it felt like skin. Amina felt dirty. Her apron was stained with palm oil, and her sandals were coated in red dust. She pulled her legs in tight, afraid to soil the interior. Beatrice scrambled in after her, immediately clutching Amina's hand in a vice grip. Peter climbed into the front passenger seat, turning to look at them through the gap. "Driver, move." "Gently," he commanded. The engine purred to life, a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. As the heavy doors sealed them in, the noise of the village, the shouting, the goats, the music, was instantly cut off. Through the tinted glass, Amina watched her food stand shrink into a tiny speck of wood and tin. For the first time in her life, she was moving without walking, gliding away from the only world she had ever known. The drive took 40 minutes, leading them out of the chaotic, potholed roads of the mainland and into an exclusive district Amina had only heard about on the radio. They arrived at a gate that looked high enough to keep out the rest of the world. It swung open silently, revealing a driveway lined with palm trees that led to a house, no, a palace, painted a pristine, blinding white. When the car stopped, Amina hesitated to step out. She looked down at her rubber sandals, coated in red village dust, and then at the sparkling marble steps leading to the front door. I cannot go in there," she whispered, clutching her apron. "I will dirty the floor." Peter opened the door, his face kind but exhausted. "The floor can be cleaned, Amina. Please." They entered a foyer that was larger than Amina's entire church. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling like a frozen explosion of diamonds. Uniformed staff, maids in crisp black and white, a butler in a suit, stood in a line, bowing as they entered. Amina shrank back, trying to make herself invisible. She felt like a stain on a perfect white sheet. Beatrice was even more terrified. The grandeur didn't impress her. It confused her. She looked around wildly, her eyes darting to the strange faces of the staff. "Prepare a meal immediately," Peter ordered the staff. "Something soft, warm." Minutes later, they were seated at a dining table long enough to seat 20 people. A chef presented a silver tray covered with a dome. He lifted it to reveal porcelain bowls of gourmet soup and freshly baked bread. The smell was heavenly, but when a maid stepped forward to place a napkin on Beatrice's lap, the old woman snapped. Beatrice swatted the maid's hand away, knocking a crystal glass over. It shattered loudly. "No! Get away!" she screamed, pushing her chair back. "Poison! They want to kill me!" The staff froze. Peter looked helpless. "Mama, it's just food. It's safe." Beatrice didn't hear him. She was breathing hard, looking for an escape. Amina sighed, realizing that in this palace she was the only bridge to reality. She stood up, took the bowl of soup from the terrified maid, and sat on the chair right next to Beatrice, ignoring the formal seating arrangement. "Mama Hannah," Amina said softly, using the name she knew her by. She took a spoon, tasted the soup herself to show it was safe, and then held it out. "It is good. Eat." Beatrice watched Amina swallow. Slowly, the tension left her shoulders. She opened her mouth, allowing Amina to feed her. Peter watched from the head of the table, realizing that all his wealth couldn't buy the one thing Amina had earned for free, his mother's trust. After an hour, The warm food and the emotional exhaustion finally overtook Beatrice. She fell asleep on a plush velvet sofa in the living room, clutching a throw pillow. A nurse, hired privately by Peter within the last hour, sat quietly in the corner to watch over her. Peter gestured for Amina to follow him. He led her down a hallway lined with expensive art to his private study. The room smelled of old books and mahogany. He walked behind his massive desk and sighed, the weight of the day evident in his posture. "Please, sit," Peter said, pointing to a leather chair. Amina sat on the edge of the seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She felt small in this room, like a child called to the principal's office. Peter opened a drawer and pulled out a thick brown leather satchel. He placed it heavily on the desk and unzipped it. Inside were stacks of currency, more money than Amina had ever seen in her life. It was enough to build a house, buy a car, and send a child to university. "I don't know how to thank you," Peter began, his voice serious. "You kept my mother alive when the world forgot her. You fed her when you barely had enough for yourself. This," he pushed the bag toward her, "this is for you. 5 million naira. Take it. It is the least I can do." Amina stared at the money. Her heart raced. She thought of her leaky roof. She thought of the debts she owed for her food supplies. She thought of how tired she was of scrubbing floors. Her hand twitched, the temptation overwhelming. But then she looked at Peter. She saw a man who believed that everything in the world could be bought and paid for. If she took this money, her act of kindness became a transaction. It became a job she was paid for, not a gift she gave freely. Slowly, Amina shook her head. She reached out and pushed the bag gently back toward him. "No, sir," she said quietly. Peter blinked, stunned. "Is it not enough?" "I can double it." "It is too much," Amina said, meeting his eyes. "But I did not feed Mama because I wanted money. I fed her because she was hungry. I fed her because when my father died, neighbors fed me. Kindness is not a business, sir. If I take this, I sell my heart." Peter sat back, speechless. He had dealt with business tycoons, politicians, and gold diggers. He had never met anyone who refused millions out of principle. For the first time, he looked at Amina not as a poor woman he needed to pay off, but as a woman who was richer in spirit than he was in his bank account. The silence in the study, thick with Peter's astonishment, was shattered by a shrill, tinny ringtone. It was Amina's phone, an old, battered device held together by a rubber band, buzzing violently against the polished mahogany desk. Amina jumped, apologizing as she grabbed it. "Hello? Mama Chinedu?" The voice on the other end was screaming so loud that Peter could hear it from where he sat. "Amina, run! Come now! They are here! The caterpillars are here!" Amina's blood ran cold. "What? Who?" "The landlords. They brought police and bulldozers. They are breaking everything. They are crushing your cooler. Come now before they take your shack." The phone slipped from Amina's sweaty palm and clattered onto the desk. Her face went grey. The integrity she had shown moments ago was replaced by raw, animalistic panic. That shack wasn't just wood and zinc. It was her life. It held her father's documents, her few clothes, her daughter's school books. "I have to go," she gasped, scrambling up from the chair so fast it tipped over. "They are destroying my house." She didn't wait for permission. She bolted for the door, her sandals slapping against the marble floor. Peter stood up immediately. He didn't call for his servants. He grabbed his phone and keyed in his security chief's number. "Prepare the convoy. Now. We are moving." He caught up to Amina in the foyer. She was struggling with the heavy front door, tears streaming down her face. "Please, sir, let me go. I have to save my things." "You cannot go there alone," Peter said, his voice hard but protective. "If they have police, they will hurt you. You are going with me." "There is no time," she cried, pushing against the door. "We will make time," Peter replied. He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but to steady her. "Get in the car, Amina. We are going to war." Within minutes, the convoy was moving again. But this time, it wasn't a slow, confused arrival. The drivers drove with aggression, sirens blaring, illegal for civilians. But Peter didn't care. He watched Amina shivering in the seat beside him. He had just offered her millions, which she refused, yet here she was, terrified of losing a shack worth pennies. It made him furious at the injustice of it all. He wasn't just going to watch, he was going to intervene. Quick pause. If you're invested in this story, Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'd hate for you to lose this channel. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's continue this journey together. The convoy arrived in a cloud of red dust and screaming sirens. The scene was apocalyptic. A massive yellow bulldozer, known locally as a caterpillar, was already tearing through the first line of wooden shacks. The sound of splintering wood and crushing zinc sheets was deafening. Women were screaming, dragging mattresses and stoves out of the path of the machine, while armed policemen stood guard, beating back anyone who tried to interfere. Amina didn't wait for the car to stop completely. She threw the door open and scrambled out. Her eyes widened in horror. The bulldozer was inches away from her food stand. "Stop, please stop," she screamed, running toward the machine. She threw herself in front of the bucket, waving her arms. A large, sweaty man in a dirty, reflective vest, the site foreman, signaled the driver to pause, but only to shout at Amina. "Woman, get out of the way. We have the eviction order. Move or we bury you with the rubbish." A policeman stepped forward, raising his baton. "You heard him. Move!" He shoved Amina hard. She stumbled back, falling into the dirt, scraping her hands against the sharp stones. Before the policeman could raise his baton again, a hand grabbed his wrist, a hand that felt like iron. The policeman spun around, ready to strike, but froze. Standing there was Peter, towering over him, flanked by 4 security operatives who had their weapons drawn and leveled at the police. The silence that descended was instant. The bulldozer engine idled down. Peter released the policeman's wrist with a shove that sent the officer stumbling back. He didn't even look at him. He looked at the foreman. "Who owns this land?" Peter asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a deadly calm that terrified the men more than shouting would have. The foreman swallowed hard, wiping sweat from his forehead. It belongs to Chief Okeke, sir. We are just doing our job." "Get Chief Okeke on the phone," Peter commanded. "Now." The foreman fumbled for his phone, dialing with shaking fingers. He handed it to Peter. Peter put the phone to his ear. "Chief, this is Peter Adeleke. Yes, I am standing on your land. I want to buy it." He listened for a second, then cut the man off. "I don't care about your development plans. I am offering you triple the market value, cash transfer, right now, but only if you call off these dogs immediately." There was a pause. Peter nodded. "Good decision." He tossed the phone back to the foreman. "Pack up your machines," Peter said coldly. "This land belongs to me now." As the foreman frantically signaled the driver to reverse, Amina sat in the dust, looking up at Peter. He wasn't just a rich man anymore. He was a titan who had moved the earth to save her small patch of dirt. The roar of the bulldozers faded into the distance, replaced by the tentative cheers of the villagers. They emerged from their hiding spots, clapping and praising God, but they kept a respectful distance from the man in the blue suit who had just performed a miracle. Peter reached down and offered his hand to Amina. She took it, her palm rough and calloused against his manicured skin. She was trembling, not from fear anymore, but from the adrenaline crash. "Thank you," she breathed, wiping dust from her skirt. "You saved us." "I only did what was necessary," Peter replied quietly. He looked at the shack behind her, a patchwork structure of wood, rusted zinc, and plastic sheets. "May I come in? I need to make sure the structure wasn't damaged by the vibration." Amina nodded quickly, flustered. "Yes, sir. Please. It is small, but come." She pushed aside the fabric curtain that served as a door. Peter ducked his head to enter. The inside was sweltering hot, smelling of charcoal smoke and cheap soap, but it was immaculately clean. The dirt floor was swept smooth. Clothes were folded neatly in a plastic crate. Peter stood in the center of the room, feeling like a giant. His eyes scanned the humble possessions: a small mattress, a kerosene lamp, a Bible, and a single wooden shelf, nailed to the wall. On that shelf sat a small, cracked picture frame. Peter's gaze drifted over it casually, then snapped back. He froze. He took a step closer, squinting in the dim light. The photo was old and slightly water-damaged, showing a man standing proud in a security guard's uniform. He had a kind face, a thick mustache, and a posture of quiet strength. "Who is this?" Peter asked, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. Amina smiled sadly, looking at the picture. "That is my father, Samuel. He was a good man. He worked in the city as a guard. He died 5 years ago, in a robbery gone wrong. Peter's heart stopped. The timeline, the uniform, the name. His hands shaking slightly, Peter reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out his leather wallet and extracted a small, laminated photo he had carried for 5 years. It showed 2 men standing side by side, his own father and the head of their security detail. He held the wallet up next to the frame on the shelf. The faces were identical. Amina gasped, looking from the shelf to the wallet and back to Peter. That is my father. Why do you have his picture?" Peter looked at Amina, seeing the resemblance now. The same eyes, the same quiet strength. The air in the room seemed to vanish. "He didn't die in a robbery." "Amina," Peter whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "He died saving my mother." Amina stared at the small laminated photo in Peter's wallet, her world tilting on its axis. "Saving your mother?" she repeated, the words feeling heavy and foreign in her mouth. "But the police came. They said he was at a bank. They said it was a stray bullet during a robbery." Peter shook his head slowly, his eyes dark with the memory of a day he had tried to forget. "They lied to you, Amina, probably to avoid paying the insurance or the compensation you deserved. The security firm. They erased the truth." He sat down on the edge of Amina's thin mattress, looking at his hands. 5 years ago, there was an assassination attempt on my family. We were traveling to the airport. We were ambushed. Peter's voice dropped to a whisper. "The gunman targeted the car my mother was in. Your father, Samuel, he was the head of the detail. When the firing started, he didn't run for cover. He opened the door and pulled my mother out. He shielded her with his own body." Amina covered her mouth, tears spilling over her cheeks. She could almost see it, the father she remembered as a gentle giant, turning into a shield. "He took 3 bullets, Peter said, his voice cracking. "He didn't fall until he was sure she was behind the armored vehicle. But in the chaos, my mother was thrown into a ravine. She hit her head. By the time the police arrived and the smoke cleared, your father was gone, and my mother had vanished into the forest." The trauma wiped her memory. Peter looked up at Amina. The realization was washing over him, crashing like a wave. "For 5 years, I searched for her. I thought she was dead. And for 5 years, you struggled in this slum because your provider was gone." He stood up and walked toward Amina, reaching out to touch her shoulder. "You didn't just find a homeless woman and feed her, Amina. You fed the woman your father died for. You finished his mission. He saved her life with his blood, and you saved her life with your food." Amina fell to her knees, sobbing. All the years of hunger, of wondering why God took her father, suddenly made sense. It wasn't a random tragedy. It was a sacrifice. "I am so sorry," Peter wept, kneeling beside her on the dirt floor. "No longer the billionaire, just a son. The agency told us he had no family. They stole your compensation. But I swear to you, by the memory of your father, I will fix this. I owe you everything." 6 months later, the red dust that once coated the village was gone, paved over with interlocking stones and lined with vibrant green palm trees. Where Amina's rickety wooden food stand once leaned against the wind, a sleek, modern building now stood. Above the glass double doors, a polished steel sign gleamed in the sunlight. The Samuel and Beatrice Community Center. Amina stood by the entrance, smoothing down the skirt of her tailored cream suit. She no longer wore the faded blue apron stained with oil. Her hands, once rough from scrubbing floors, were manicured, though she still clasped them together with the same humble grace. She wasn't just a resident here anymore. She was the director of operations. A black limousine pulled up, not an invasion this time, but a celebration. Peter stepped out, looking relaxed and smiling. He reached back in to help Beatrice. The transformation in the old woman was miraculous. Her hair was styled, her skin glowed with health, and the haunted look in her eyes had been replaced by a sharp, warm clarity. She walked with a cane, not for support, but for elegance. The village crowd, now employed and secure in the new housing units Peter had built, cheered wildly. Beatrice waved, spotting Amina. She bypassed her son and went straight to the younger woman, pulling her into a fierce hug. "My daughter," Beatrice whispered. "You look beautiful." They gathered at the podium for the ribbon cutting. Peter took the microphone, the crowd falling silent. "Years ago, a man named Samuel gave his life to protect my family," Peter began, his voice echoing across the courtyard. And when I failed to protect his daughter, she turned around and saved my mother. We thought we were building a center here to feed the hungry, but we were building a home. Peter turned to Amina, holding out a leather folder. Amina, I cannot bring your father back, but I can ensure his name lives on, and I can ensure you never face the world alone again. Amina opened the folder. It wasn't an employment contract. It was legal adoption papers. I don't need a business partner, Peter said, his eyes wet. I need a sister. Tears streamed down Amina's face as she looked at the papers, then at the large portrait of her father hanging in the lobby behind them. He was watching over them, finally, at peace. She nodded, unable to speak, and Peter pulled her and Beatrice into a three-way embrace. The cameras flashed, capturing not a billionaire and his charity case, but a family reunited by blood, sacrifice, and the unbreakable power of a plate of food given in kindness. You made it to the end, thank you, from the bottom of my heart. If you loved this story, the next one is going to blow your mind. I'm talking more twists, more emotion, more of everything that keeps you hooked. Click on that image on your screen right now and jump straight into the next tale. You're going to love it.